Hello there, Ramblers, and welcome to yet another instalment of Reese Rambles, my weekly podcast all about the latest comings and goings, movings and shakings, and indeed all the rest of it in the worlds of vintage and retro computing, gaming, and technology. Hope you're doing well out there, and welcome to another weekend, and indeed the second Ramble of 2026. Weather-wise, here in the UK, certainly in my part of the UK anyway, not much going on. It's a bit overcast, it's a bit cold, but it's not freezing, it's not particularly warm, not particularly windy, a little bit of rain. Not very exciting at all. Typical British weather. Now, just before we dive into the first story for this week, you may have noticed the elephant in the room here. This is my Pentium 233 MMX system in its ancient 286, 386 era case. I am a big fan of this case. You remember, if you've been watching my channel for a long time, my main channel, Control.Reese, you'll probably remember that I retro-brighted this. So, obviously submerged this front panel in peroxide to bleach it back to white. And you'll notice that it is turning a bit yellow again. Not that that's relevant at all, but I just spotted it up on the monitor there and thought it was quite interesting. And the reason I have this out is because I am using it for my review of the Pico IDE, which I have been tinkering with over the past week or so. And of course, that will be a review video on the main channel in the near future. But anyway, enough about me. Of course, you are here for vintage and retro computing gaming news, and I do have some news for you. So let's dive into the first story. Now, this is over on timeextension.com, our good friend Damien McFerrin again, and it's to do with Commodore's official remake of Taito's New Zealand story. And that's right, I am going with Taito as the pronunciation here. I know people say that a bit differently, but I think that's quite close to the original Japanese. Not really sure. I'm sure someone will let me know down in the comments. But the important thing here is that this much loved, much beloved platformer, I'm certainly a huge fan of the original game as well, where you play as a chick, the avian kind, jumping around on platforms and shooting enemies and climbing up and down ladders and all the rest of it. I think it's been quite a long time since I played it, but this is an official remake, and I talked about this kind of around the middle of last year on a previous Ramble when this version of Commodore, not the version that is currently owned by Perifractic, and we will talk about that a little bit in a second, but they announced two games or two new kind of sequels in some really well-known and well-loved franchises. This was one of them, and just to take a quick diversion, the other one was Xenon 3 Hyper Blast, which of course the sequel to the Bitmap Brothers games back in the day, Xenon and Xenon 2 Mega Blast. Say what you will about those games. A lot of people say that Xenon 2 is a bit overrated and a bit repetitive, but I think those of us who did kind of enjoy it back at the time when it was first released do have very fond memories of it. The graphics and the sound and stuff being particularly impressive. Of course, they had the sampled music track on the Amiga. Not quite the same on the ST. We did get the sampled music for the intro, but during the actual game, it was kind of a chiptune version. I'm really fond of that. I think it sounds great, but then, of course, I would because I'm very nostalgic for that particular version. But we're not here to talk about the technical capabilities of the ST and the Amiga yet again. There haven't been any updates on Xenon 3 as of yet, I will say. I did just go fishing around to see if they had said anything else about this or if it was going to land anytime soon. But no, nothing on this. And to be honest, the original release announcement was essentially we're making a sequel. It's going to be a tribute and an evolution, they said, an explosive roguelite with top-down gameplay and real-time transformations between spaceship and tank modes, just like the original game. So kind of back to their roots. Every element is designed to recreate that feeling, the arcade feel, the fast pace, the desire for one more playthrough. But yeah, what we're talking about here is New Zealand's story, and the reason we are talking about this is because it is coming next month. And just before we dig into the official announcement, because there's quite a bit more information here, which is nice to see, of course, this is Commodore Industries. This is the Italian people who are using the Commodore name at the moment. They are in kind of this ongoing legal dispute with the, shall I say, the American Commodore? Where are they based? It's kind of an international collaborative thing. But, of course, the Commodore that is being led by the YouTuber Perifractic Christian. They have kind of been at each other's throats and stuff and taking stuff through the courts in disputes over who actually owns the Commodore name and logo. And to be honest, if that wasn't the case, then it wouldn't be Commodore. So, anyway. But as far as New Zealand's story is concerned, they are forging ahead with this, which is a good thing, of course. And yeah, this is an outing, reports at timeextension.com. I'm getting sidetracked already. It's only been 5 minutes. I don't know. Would you expect any less from me? This is an outing which honours the original Taito spirit while enhancing it with a modern artistic direction that breathes new life into its iconic characters and stages. And here are the key selling points. So it's a classic reborn. The legendary 1988 Taito platformer returns with a modern look full of colour, energy and new challenges. Relive the classics, embrace the new, iconic worlds and enemies, meet brand new levels and foes in an adventure ready to surprise you. 2D arcade platforming, jump, run and face challenging enemies and bosses in levels packed with action, rhythm and pure adrenaline. Weapons, vehicles and power-ups, that's quite exciting, isn't it? You can use bows, projectiles, flying vehicles and plenty of upgrades to overcome every obstacle and save your Kiwi friends. Yes, of course it was a Kiwi. I said it was a chick, didn't I? Like a chicken, but it's not. Of course it was a Kiwi. Because it's New Zealand story. Like I say, it's been a very long time since I played this game. A vibrant world of colour and detail, updated art direction brings Tiki and his universe to life while keeping the original Taito spirit, and for longtime fans and newcomers, perfect for those reliving the nostalgia of the original arcade or discovering its timeless charm for the first time. And we do have some screenshots here from this remake, so yeah, there it is. It looks like we've got a bit of a cel-shaded type style on the enemies and on the main character here. Got a lion there in a cage. I don't know if the lion's going to escape from its cage at some point. Of course, we've got some of this classic platforming. I think some of these enemies and things will be instantly recognisable if you are a fan of the original. We've got some a rope thing with a moving platform on it. Classic 2D stuff again, and yeah, this screenshot here, which very much looks in the spirit of certainly the start of the original game. So yeah, say what you will about the art style. It's kind of an updated 2D. You know, they've kind of veered away from the original pixel art style and gone with this, like I say, kind of a cel-shaded type thing, up-resed graphics and whatnot. It's not a remake. It is apparently a full-blown sequel. And yeah, it mentions here that it launches on Steam next month. But there isn't a link to the Steam page. So there is that. I will try and track that down for you, and I will link that down in the description below. But hey, if I wasn't fully prepared going into this, then it wouldn't be Reese Rambles, would it? Fantastic start to this week's Ramble. Very much looking forward to checking this out when it is released. And good to see the old Commodore, or at least one of them, putting out some proper retro-styled stuff. In fact, the other one is too, isn't it? Good news for Commodore fans all round, just lately. And so, once again, we find ourselves paying tribute to one of the greatest games of all time. I am, of course, talking about Doom. Big shout out to the Doom Shrine, as always. I know you can't really see it because there's a load of stuff in the way this week. But yeah, my collection of Doom-related releases and paraphernalia on the shelf behind me gets a shout out pretty much every week because there is a Doom-related story pretty much every single week. I don't think there's a community around a game that is as active as the Doom community, even after all of these years. And just as an aside, because I do like an aside, if you are a supporter of mine, you will have seen a post over on Patreon this week of me running Doom on a rather unusual device. And that is going to be a main channel video at some point in the near future. I know I keep promising these videos. I am back on it. We are going to see some main channel releases in the very near future, which is great because it does feel good to finally kind of be back on things properly. But of course, this isn't about me. This is about Doom, and there is a fine tradition, as I mentioned, of porting Doom to all sorts of weird and wonderful devices. We've seen it running on digital cameras and printers and vapes. I ran it on a desk. All right, it is just a standard PC built into a desk, so that is kind of cheating. But yeah, you know, all sorts of stuff like that. A pregnancy test, that one's always worthy of a shout out as well. I think that's probably one of the stranger ones, but yeah, it should come as no surprise this week that Doom has been ported to yet another interesting device. And of course, as is my duty, I'm going to report on that right now. So this story over at tomshardware.com, one of my favourite websites, this time by Luke James. So I don't know if they've given Mark Tyson the week off or what, but this is somebody running Doom on an electric cooking pot. Doom conquers the kitchen through an electric cooking pot. Classic shooter runs seamlessly after a full device firmware refresh. By Luke James over at Tom's Hardware. As mentioned, YouTuber ports the classic shooter to a Krupp's Cook For Me by reflashing its touchscreen computer. A YouTuber has managed to run Doom on a Krupp's Cook For Me smart pressure cooker after dumping and reflashing the firmware on the appliance's touchscreen control hardware. Documented in a teardown and reverse engineering video, the YouTuber shows the game running locally on the cooker's display without modifying the electronics responsible for heating or safety systems. The starting point was the built-in Wi-Fi of the Cook For Me. While browsing the settings menu, the creator noticed that the first 3 bytes are from Expressive, so there's most likely an ESP inside. Of course, that's a little microcontroller. That observation prompted a full teardown of the appliance. Opening the unit reveals split hardware. At the bottom of the device is what the creator describes as really just a temperature sensor, heating element with a safety switch. The lower board is built around an STM microcontroller and handles the heating relay, temperature measurement, and a fail-safe cutoff in case something or the relay got stuck. Yeah, sounds like a well-designed appliance. Connected to it by a simple 4-wire cable is the front touchscreen module. Removing that assembly exposes significantly more capable hardware. The Wi-Fi module is confirmed to be an ESP32, while the main processor on the display board is identified as a Renesas R7 S7-21031VZ. Rolls off the tongue, doesn't it? The creator calls it quite a nice chip, adding that it is quite powerful and has a lot of GPIOs. It's an ARM core, full-blown ARM CPU in a pressure cooker. What is the world coming to? The touchscreen board also includes 128 megabytes of flash, 128 meg of RAM, a capacitive touch controller, display driver, beeper, external EEPROM, and a non-populated SD card slot. The SP32's flash was dumped and found to be encrypted. Logging suggested cloud connectivity, with the creator noting that it hints it being connected via AWS Cloud, so MQTT via a private key, if he wanted to do anything with it. So, he hooked up an SWD flasher to that Renesas processor, successfully dumped the flash, and basically went through the bootloader logs and reverse engineered how the LCD was initialized, and that enabled him to build this custom firmware and flash it onto the chip. After writing enough wrapper around Doom, continues the story, importing it to the firmware, we can fully make it run on the cooking pot. So the game runs on the Cook For Me's display with the touchscreen mapped to different regions for buttons, delivering what he describes as a quite nice frame rate. Absurd, yes, but the video gives us an interesting view into how smart appliances are built. The Cook For Me's cooking logic remains isolated on a simple controller, while its interface and networking are handled by a far more capable embedded computer. In this case, the separation made it possible to run Doom on a pressure cooker, and no doubt the internet will bring us even more outlandish examples of weird devices to play Doom on in the near future. Then again, we've already had Doom in space, so perhaps that's as weird as things are going to get. And I'm not going to click on that story, but I did report on that a few weeks or maybe even a couple of months back, where someone had run Doom on a satellite, but of course they couldn't control it in real time, so it was a case of it kind of generating screenshots and sending those backwards, and it was a really convoluted setup. But I love it. The weirder the better. So yeah, it looks like this thing is very well engineered. Of course, it's Krupp's. I think that is more of a kind of a premium brand, isn't it? But a full-blown microcontroller in there with 128 meg of RAM, which is an awful lot more than the 4 megabyte 486 that I originally played Doom on back in the day, and 128 meg of storage as well, which again, it was probably around the same as what my 486 PC had back in the early 90s. But just great to see Doom running on yet another device. I haven't seen, they haven't linked to whether you can actually download this and flash it yourself. I will confess that I haven't watched the video, so that is on my watch later list to check out later on. But always good to see Doom running on something that it was never originally intended to run on, keeping the love of the game alive. As mentioned, one of my favourite games of all time. Wonderful stuff. A story now for my fellow old people, those of us who remember playing audio CDs on our PCs back in the 90s. Something of course, I don't remember the very first time that I did it, but we certainly had a PC back in the mid-90s with a CD drive, and I remember playing audio CDs on it and thinking it was actually really cool. A great way to listen to CDs while I was on the PC, mucking about in that way that I do. And of course, that later evolved into ripping those CDs using stuff like Audio Grabber and the lame MP3 encoder. Of course, lame ain't an MP3 encoder, everybody knows that. And then even like burning my own mix CDs and stuff a bit later on with CDRs and things. But one thing that I think was always really cool, and one of the kind of the main benefits of playing those audio CDs on a PC, was that it could connect to the internet and get all of the track information as well. So if you were ripping to MP3, of course, it could name all of the files accordingly. You didn't have to sit and type in all the track names and things. And if you just sat there listening to the CD, the track names would come up. Something we very much take for granted, I think, in this day and age with, Spotify and other kind of online music services. And so, it is surprising to see that one of the companies, Microsoft, who were a little bit late to the whole internet thing, and indeed a little bit late to all of this online CD metadata and stuff, has become one of the first to turn off their online CD metadata service, which is even more surprising considering that physical media is seeing a bit of a comeback just lately, which is something I have talked about quite a bit in recent rambles. Now, I'm not personally into CDs anymore myself. I do still have pretty much all of my old CDs, I think, if only because they're pretty worthless, so I haven't sold them on. But I have been getting into vinyl quite a lot lately. But anyway, that's not really relevant to this story. This is a story over on the Register. Microsoft Windows Media Player stops serving up CD album info. No naming that tune and no album covers. Of course, yeah, not just the track names and things. We used to get the album art and stuff as well, didn't we? It's a story by Richard Speed, and I thought this was quite surprising. Microsoft is celebrating the resurgence of interest in physical media in the only way it knows how, by halting the Windows Media Player metadata service. How do Microsoft keep screwing up so... in such a big way just lately. Readers of a certain vintage will remember inserting a CD into their PC and watching Windows Media Player populate with track listings and album artwork. No more. Sometime before Christmas, the metadata servers stopped working, and on Windows 10 or 11, the result is the same. Album not found. We tried this out at Vulture Central, which of course is what the Register call their headquarters, and have done since... they've been around since like the mid-90s themselves, haven't they? Anyway, back onto the story. We tried this out at Vulture Central on some sacrificial Windows devices that had media drives and can confirm that a variety of compact discs were met with stony indifference. Some 90s cheese that was successfully ripped for personal use decades ago, no longer recognised. A reissue of something achingly hip, also not recognised. We asked Microsoft if the service had indeed been retired or if there might be a reprieve or workaround, but we were met with equal indifference from the tech giant's PR organ. A message on a Reddit forum purporting to be a chat with a Microsoft support representative suggested that the servers have indeed been shut down and that a third-party alternative should be sourced. Of course, it was CDDB, wasn't it? The one that Audio Grabber used. I remember using that back in the day. Alternatively, I don't know if that's still around, just as an aside. But alternatively, customers can manually enter the information like it's the 1990s all over again. The timing is unfortunate. Tired of content vanishing from streaming services or disappearing into algorithmic feeds, consumers are returning to physical media like CDs. Physical media drives had yet to completely disappear from Windows devices, but the default service used by Windows Media Player for album information, musicmatch-ssl.xboxlive.com, does not appear to serve up any metadata. Is that related to the old Music Match juke? I'm showing my age here, aren't I? The old Music Match jukebox. Did Microsoft acquire that and start using the online service as the back end for Windows Media Player's metadata stuff? Does that make sense? That seems like a plausible sequence of events, doesn't it? Windows Media Player has a long history with Windows. Yeah, it does. Well done. First released as part of the multimedia extensions for Windows 3.0, it's evolved over the years, gaining support for streaming, ripping, and burning CDs. It survived Microsoft's Zune experiment. Shout out to the Zune. I still have mine. In fact, it's out of shop. Microsoft's Zune experiment and remains in Windows 11, though now branded Legacy, as Microsoft pushes users towards its modern media player app. Microsoft does not share its device telemetry, but it clearly concluded too few users still play CDs to justify maintaining the metadata services. Apple's iTunes, on the other hand, recognised every CD we threw at it, which is quite ironic considering, I think Apple were kind of one of the first to ditch physical, optical drives, weren't they? I mean, my MacBook Air here doesn't have an optical drive. So there you go. If you are a Windows Media Player user, you will no longer get the metadata for your CDs when you stick them in and play them in Windows, which is seems like a bit of an end of an era, really, doesn't it? It's something that I quite fondly remember, like I say. I'm just going to pop over here for a second, because I did find this classic Masters Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart CD in the desk PC, which incidentally I did mention in my previous story about Doom. And if you remember that video, you remember me listening to that and the metadata and stuff coming up and stuff. Yeah, you know, audio CDs. If nothing else, that PC was used as a CD player, and just goes to show that it is a very valid use case that people were using their PCs for. Certainly Wolverhampton District Council were with their desk PC anyway. So yeah, that's that. No more audio CD metadata under Windows. May music match-ssl.xboxlive.com rest in peace. Now, if there is one topic that is particularly dear to my heart, other than, of course, Doom and Atari, it would be the British computing industry, with brands like Acorn and Sinclair, Apricot and Oric. Are they British? I always used to think they were French for some reason. I'm pretty sure they are actually British. RM, of course, who provided all of our school PCs back in the 90s. But perhaps one of the biggest and best known names of all is, of course, Sir Lord Alan Sugar's brand Amstrad, with the AMS of Amstrad being his initials, no less. Gone on to be a bit of a character in his own right. Of course, he is kind of the host of The Apprentice here in the UK, and very outspoken on social media and indeed on any other kind of media that he can get his hands on. But love him or hate him, I think it's hard to argue that he didn't do an awful lot for the British computer industry. Now, I don't cover a lot of Amstrad stuff here on Reese Rambles, I will say, purely because it's not a brand that I have a lot of personal experience with. I had a friend who had I think it was the 464 when I was a kid, although it was a bit long in the tooth at the time, and I have gone on to get into kind of Amstrad PCs and things. But I know a lot of my regular listeners and viewers are big fans of Amstrad, and it's very, very cool indeed to see that there is a new user group, a new community around this fantastic, iconic brand that has sprung up in the UK, and they are planning a very big meetup for later on in the year. So I wanted to shine a bit of a light on this and give it a bit of publicity for all of you Amstrad fans out there. And hey, you never know, I might pop down and check it out myself. So this is UCAG, UKAG, the UK Amstrad Group. And they have a meet which is happening in June, which, from what I can see, is in Surrey, near Chertsey, if you are at all local to the area. Anyway, the story here on ucag.org.uk, which will, of course, will be linked down in the description, along with all the other stories I talk about, as always. The story here on ucag.org.uk by Chris Green reads, more info on the June UK Amstrad Group meet. UCAG's first official meet takes place on Sunday the 21st of June 2026. Doors open at 9 a.m. and close at 8 p.m. or sooner if everyone decides to wind down a bit early and go to the pub, as can happen. Sounds like a good old-fashioned user group to me. Lovely picture of Ottershaw Village Hall there, where the meet is going to be taking place. Quintessentially British, isn't it? And yeah, it's £20 per person, but the price does include tea, coffee and snacks throughout the day, which sounds like a good deal to me, and you can buy the tickets online. Ottershaw Village Hall is located roughly 5 minutes from Junction 11 of the M25, making it easy to reach from most motorways heading towards London. There's a large free car park, which is great to hear, and it is outside the ULEZ zone, the ultra low emissions zone in London. So if you are driving a car of a similar vintage to these old 80s Amstrad machines, you can also go there without having to pay the London congestion charge. So that's always a bonus. Looks like they put a lot of thought into this. It's a Sunday, so there are minimal parking restrictions. You can park on local roads and stuff. There's a lot of talk of parking here, isn't there? That's a very British thing as well. Even more talk of parking. Don't park in the Miller and Carter pub and steakhouse because they have ANPR cameras. It's all gone a bit Alan Partridge, hasn't it? Unlikely as it is, if the car park fills up, rest assured there's lots of on-street parking on Broxton. Anyway, there's also a train. The nearest train station is Chertsey, as mentioned, which is 2.3 miles from the venue, and an inexpensive taxi ride. Anyway, let's get on to the details of the actual meet. It's far too much talk of parking so far. So what to bring? If you have a table ticket, there will be a table and a chair for you if you're planning on exhibiting, which I'm sure they would very much appreciate. All you need to do is bring your computers and associated bits. This list will help ensure you don't forget the essentials, so computer, monitor, joystick, power cables, power supplies, games, tapes, discs, cartridges, mains extension lead, and a screwdriver, just in case you need to open up your machine. And I do find that a full toolkit and even perhaps a soldering iron is a requirement for this type of thing, based on previous experience. So, events planned for the day. There will be an all-day user group meetup, a chance to do all things Amstrad, so fix them, play games, show how to use different pieces of software and hardware, use them, show them off, and talk about them, whatever you want to do. There is a gaming contest. The exact game is still to be decided, but there will be a gaming competition, a high-score challenge, or a knockout with a trophy for the winner. There will be a Machine of the Meet award, so you can win a trophy if you have the most interesting, unusual, creative, or otherwise different Amstrad at the meet. Whether it's an example of your modification skills, a trash to treasure story, has anyone run this by Neil, or something else, we want to know about your Amstrad and why it matters to you. And Roland Perry, the honorary president of the UK AG, of course, one of the people behind the Amstrad CPC, the PCW, and many other Amstrad computers. Massive name in the Amstrad world and indeed in the retro computing world. So, yeah, worth it to see the talk by Roland Perry. He will be giving a talk in the talks room. I'm assuming as it's a talks plural room, there will be other talks as well, but they haven't been announced yet from what I can see on this website. And indeed, as an attendee, you are welcome to bring any bits that you would like to sell. So they will be providing 3 red bring and buy tables, which will be directly in front of the stage. So, yeah, the table plan will be sent to attendees 48 hours before the event. There's a nice map here of the venue. Of course, we've already seen directions and pictures of the place. Looks very nice. And also a very detailed explanation of the parking situation. Yeah, just some Q&As and FAQs and that kind of stuff. Yes, there is a Miller and Carter pub / steakhouse across the road. And they are planning at the end of the day of having a bit of a pop into there for a bit of a drink as well. Wonderful, wonderful stuff. You can't get much more British than that, can you? So just a bit of a shout out to a new group and their very first meetup in June. Fantastic venue, of course, a huge name there with Roland Perry giving that talk. And I just want to wish them all the best, all the success with their meetup. It is in June, so still quite a while off. I don't know if I'll, this will come up on my radar again and I'll get to give them another shout out. But please do go check out their website. And if you are at all interested in Amstrad stuff, I think it's going to be a very worthwhile event. This next story is very much retro inspired, as you are about to discover, but I will say perhaps running on modern foundations, because this is to do with UEFI, which of course is the boot process that most modern PCs use. And if you are at all experienced with these modern computers, these newfangled devices, you'll know that it's very capable indeed with some of these interfaces and some of these pre-operating system boot things being far more capable than some of the early operating systems of the 90s with stuff like online BIOS updates and stuff like that. There I go, using the word BIOS. And of course, those of us who were around back in the olden days will no doubt remember those original BIOSes, those text-based interfaces where you could go through, set all the configuration values for your computer, and save it to a flash chip, and that would kind of manage all of the hardware in the computer. Or before that, if you're even older than I am, you'll probably remember dip switches and stuff like the IBM 5150, setting the drive type and stuff like that. But of course, that has now all been superseded by UEFI. And I thought this project using it was very cool indeed. So this is a story over on tomshardware.com, again, by Mark Tyson. So they didn't give him the week off. Dev creates a selection of UEFI games you have to beat in order to boot your computer. So this was a 10-month project, and it will shut down your PC if you lose. So you boot up your computer, and rather than running through all the UEFI stuff and then booting into your operating system, it will initially load up some games, very simple games that you have to beat in order to continue to use your computer, which, if nothing else, this kind of UEFI programming stuff does fascinate me because it's not something I know a great deal about. But anyway, the story goes on to read, would you like to face a gaming challenge every time you start up your computer? If you answered in the affirmative, then Alejandro Armas, aka MyCroftsNM on GitHub, has a treat for you. The Linux enthusiast has created a quintet of UEFI games, that's 5, for those of you following along at home, with the premise of win, boot, lose, shut down. Head on over to the UEFI game repository on GitHub, and you will find 5 games to provide a PC booting gaming challenge. Armus appears to have been working on this compendium of UEFI games for approximately 10 months. The games offer a mix of challenges spanning quiz-style games, a Simon-like challenge, and even a vertical scroller to make sure your reaction times are up to speed before you access your computer. So the games are User Evaluation for Ineptness, and that challenges you to add 2 random numbers from 0 to 99. If your answer is incorrect, the system mocks you and shuts down. Maths is not my strong point, so although I'm sure I could probably add together 2 numbers. Is that, if there was like a very strict time limit on that, I imagine that would be quite nerve-wracking. Insult Sword Fighting is a Monkey Island-inspired diversion. Users are asked to choose the correct comeback to continue booting. You can manually edit insults.txt to expand the scope of this UEFI games. And I will say, for those of you listening on the podcasting platforms, there is a screenshot of this which says you fight like a dairy farmer. And it has a selection of answers as per Monkey Island and its insult sword fighting system, which hopefully you will be familiar with. Fall to Boot presents the user with a vertical scrolling procedurally generated tunnel, and Armus underlines that you will have to reach the bottom or you'll fail to boot. Failure is caused in this game if your starlight cursor hits the tunnel walls during its rapid descent. Again, there is a screenshot of that on this story, and it is just an ASCII-based dot thing that you have to steer through this tunnel. Age Verification is a Leisure Suit Larry-inspired 80s pop culture trivia quiz. Due to the subject matter, this kind of filters out those too young to use the computer, snarks the Linux enthusiast dev. And to explain that one for you, if you remember the Leisure Suit Larry games back in the day, they had an age gate on them, which was basically a quiz with answers that only members of the older generations, perhaps is the kindest way to put it, would understand, which I thought was a very novel approach and indeed, very effective. Anyway, lastly, there is the UEFI Says game, which is another graphical rather than text-based title. UEFI Says is a memory test, but not for the computer, quips Armus. Again, you must succeed at this pattern-matching game to boot your computer. And you can see videos of those games in action if you head to the GitHub and expand the demo videos section. These games can run directly from a PC's unified extensible firmware interface at boot. Many people still refer to the PC's UEFI as the BIOS, as do I, as they basically do the same job of getting your system ready to boot into an operating system. UEFI is just the modern, modular, more secure and flexible successor to the BIOS. Armus compendium of games aren't the first UEFI gaming apps we've featured. They are kind of unique though, as they offer a fun boot time challenge. And they talk about a previous story of theirs from October, where someone recreated Zaxxon in UEFI, which you can go and check out if you check out the link down below. So there we go. You can head to the GitHub, you can download that, you can install it in the UEFI of your computer, and every single time you turn it on, you will have to face a series of challenges to prove your worthiness of using the computer on any given moment, which I love stuff like this. There isn't enough creativity and fun and stuff nowadays. It's all cynical cash grab rubbish. You'll notice that this episode isn't sponsored, by the way. Some SEGA Dreamcast news for you next, and previously here on Reese Rambles, I have, of course, talked about the work of Falco Gurgis, the developer of an open-source Dreamcast SDK known as Callisti OS. Now, he has been personally involved in porting and developing some games for the Dreamcast himself, and he's also a big supporter, of course, of other developers who have used his SDK and likes to help to promote some of their projects and things too. It seems like this one is a bit of a collaboration, but before we jump into this, let's have a look at some of the other stuff that he has been talking about or tweeting about over on X. I know controversial at the moment due to stuff going on in the news, but it is his. It does seem to be his kind of main and only outlet for these projects. So anyway, Falco Gurgis, of course, perhaps most famously known for the GTA 3 and GTA Vice City ports to the Dreamcast. Particularly, that got quite a lot of media interest at the time because someone who worked at Rockstar back in the day when GTA 3 was being developed actually came out and said that, yes, there was going to be an official version of that game on the Dreamcast. It's just because that console was quite kind of short-lived and a bit of a, I don't want to say commercial failure, because that makes it sound like it wasn't a very good console, and it was just kind of business reasons that led to Sega pulling the Dreamcast and competition from other companies. A big shame in my mind, I will say. It's one of my favourite consoles of all time, and one of the best consoles ever devised, I think, in my humble opinion. But yeah, someone from Rockstar, sorry I don't recall the name, but I do remember reporting on this at the time, did come out and say that there was a Dreamcast version of GTA 3 in the works, and it was purely a business, purely commercial decision for them to pull that, and that it was great to see that someone was tackling the project again. And indeed, that project came out absolutely brilliantly. You can go and download that and play it on your own original hardware yourself if you so wish. Of course, that was GTA 3, and then later Vice City got the same treatment. Best known, of course, for their PlayStation 2, PC, and original Xbox releases. Huge games. GTA still a massive franchise, one of my favourite franchises. But there have been other projects that Falco has reported on here. So we have a port of Sonic Mania to the Dreamcast yet again. This looks brilliant. This one did largely pass me by at the time, but if you are interested in that, you can go and check out. You can go and check that out if you like. And another one that I did remember, that I do remember reporting on as well, was a port of Mario Kart, which we'll talk about a little bit more in a second, and a port of Wipeout. Of course, that's a futuristic PlayStation space racing game, which was absolutely huge on the PlayStation, and deservedly so, because it is a brilliant game. So back to Mario Kart, and this was ported by someone called J.N. Martin. And I also talked about this. I've given this project rather a lot of coverage, so it seems. Basically, someone had decompiled the original Nintendo 64 release of Mario Kart 64 and then ported it to the Sega Dreamcast and added Sonic as a playable character as well. Quite rightly, as would have been the case, I'm sure, if that game was released on that platform at the time. Now, J.N. Martin has gone ahead and done it again, and that is the news that I'm reporting on this week. Now we're fully up to speed, 3.5 minutes into this story. So just a quick mention over on Time Extension. This is Super Mario 64, which of course was a revolutionary platformer in its own right. A lot of people think it was the first 3D platformer. Of course it wasn't. There were games that came before it, but widely regarded, and quite rightly regarded, I will say, as perhaps the 3D platformer that got it right, everything right as far as the controls and the camera and stuff were concerned, and certainly set the template for a lot of those 3D mascot platformers back in the late 90s. And I am a huge fan of Mario 64, if you hadn't guessed, despite the fact that I wasn't an N64 person back in the day. I have been enjoying discovering the N64's catalogue in recent years. But yeah, this is the continuation of the originally ported decompilation that was started by our brother and fellow developer, Mr. Neo, explains Falco Gergis. So it's J.R. Martin. This is fixing the performance, audio, and other issues and doing the finishing touches. Now, I did talk about this before, but as mentioned, this is now available for you to download and actually run on your own original hardware, should you want to go and check it out. There is some video footage here, some captured footage of the game actually running, and I will say it looks absolutely brilliant on the Dreamcast. In fact, graphically it is I would say superior to the N64 version, purely because it's a lot sharper and a lot cleaner. The N64 was quite famously known for its rather blurry output, and of course not a problem that affected the Dreamcast, which was a much more capable system. Only fair as it came along 3 years later. So there is a link here to the GitHub. Now, I will say that Falco has made a mistake in this post, and it does link to the Mario Kart 64 port that I talked about a minute ago, rather than this. So I will post the correct link down below. I've actually already recorded this story once and clicked through and then realised that I was reading a load of information about completely the wrong thing. So if we click through to this, let me just pause this video so it's not playing in the background. This is JN Martin 84's GitHub, and the project is called SM64DC. Now, there's some quite interesting stuff about this. There is a CDI builder, is the main kind of concept behind this that I wanted to talk about, because Of course, distributing Nintendo's copyrighted content is always going to be a bit of a minefield. And Nintendo do sell Super Mario 64 on their current platforms, on the Switch and the Switch 2. And there is no doubt at all in my mind that if someone out there started giving away their own version of Super Mario 64 with all the levels and the graphics and the sound and everything else that's owned by Nintendo, that they would get sued and shut down very rapidly. So you do need to provide your own original game files for this. And often the case is with some of these projects that you need to track down the original game files and then you need to download a load of code stuff, a load of development stuff. Of course, it's stuff I deal with in my day job, so it doesn't really scare me. But for anyone just wanting to check out the game, there are always so many hoops to jump through and commands that you need to run and things that need to be built and cryptic error messages and stuff like that. But they have actually provided an online tool here, as they did previously with the port of Mario Kart 64. So if you can track down an original ROM, or indeed rip your own original copy of Super Mario 64 from cartridge, because that's what we're all going to be doing, you can upload it to this link here, and it will give you a downloadable CDI, which is a CD image for the Dreamcast. So if you have something like I can't remember the name of the thing now, GDEMU, of course, the optical drive emulator for the Dreamcast. You can drop it onto an SD card and run it from there. Or indeed, you can burn it to a CD and you can play it that way, because the Dreamcast has been able to play recordable media for quite a long time now. Arguably, one of the issues that did lead to the downfall of the Dreamcast as well. But that is by the by. There are also build instructions as well, should you want to build it locally rather than using the online tool. But of course, the big news here is that this previously kind of alpha quality release has been improved and polished and has now had an official release with all of those sound and graphics issues fixed. And probably at the point where, if you haven't checked it out already, it's definitely well worth a look. So this is Super Mario 64, ported to the Dreamcast, looking absolutely fantastic. And yeah, for fans of the original game, or those of us who largely missed it back in the day, a very good way of checking out a much-loved classic. So, some big beef this week in the open source hardware world. And I wanted to talk about this a bit because, of course, I have done some of my own hardware, my own microcontroller-based projects and things on my channel over the years. And it is also something that I am quite interested in personally as a hobbyist. Of course, we've got stuff like the Arduino, the Raspberry Pi, the BeagleBoard, things like that. There's the Propeller, which I've used for that video music clone in the past. But the one that we want to talk about here is the Teensy, and this is very similar to those other projects, microcontroller board with GPIO pins and stuff, programmable, of course, at the heart of many an open source and DIY project. And there has been a big dispute between Sparkfun, which is the sole manufacturer of the Teensy, and Adafruit, which is the biggest distributor of the Teensy. And basically what has happened here is it will no longer be available for sale from Adafruit. But there's a little bit more to it. Now, I want to try to avoid anything too kind of personal or libelous or anything here. I'm not going to be, this isn't a drama channel, but I want to try to take apart the story behind the scenes here a little bit, because there's been a lot of confusion and a lot of discussion about this, and I've been struggling to understand it myself. So, this started with a rather mysterious letter and press release from Sparkfun Electronics. And this started on January the 7th. So, official response to comments made in a public forum, writes Sparkfun. Due to recent activities that are in direct violation of our code of conduct, which is publicly available on our website, Sparkfun has determined that it can no longer transact with Adafruit Industries. Please see official communication we sent to Adafruit below. Without oversharing, recent violations include sending and forwarding offensive, antagonistic and derogatory emails and material to Sparkfun employees, former employees and customers, and inappropriately involving a Sparkfun customer with a private matter. We understand this may be frustrating. From time to time, we have to make difficult business decisions, and this decision was made after thoughtful consideration. We wish Adafruit the best in future endeavours. Please note, Sparkfun continues to embrace our strong reseller network for Sparkfun original products, Teensy, and a multitude of other products. Please see our distributor map below. So the Teensy will be available from other distributors, and they have provided a list of those as well. There was an update on the 14th of January, which we'll talk about in a second, but They've also posted a copy of the letter here, which they sent to Adafruit, which essentially just goes over all of the stuff that we just mentioned. Now, there then was an official response from Adafruit on January the 12th, talking about discontinuing the Teensy. So due to supply changes outside of our control, Adafruit is discontinuing the sale and support of Teensy products. We were informed by postal mail from Sparkfun, that letter that we've just seen, that Teensy products will no longer be available to Adafruit. We contacted Paul Stoffregen, is that right, to confirm, and were told the decision is final. And Paul here is, of course, the owner of Sparkfun. Existing inventory will be sold through while supplies last. Once inventory is exhausted, no additional units will be restocked. We have put the remaining stock on sale. The decision is based solely on supply availability. Teensy sold at a steady pace for us, and we were glad to support Paul and the platform for many years, help place it into reseller channels and assist when issues came up. We will update our catalogue and documentation accordingly. Now, there is a rather big piece of news off the back of this as well, which is that Adafruit are now working on their own open source clone of the Teensy, which is quite exciting, I think. I think. What's next? After a brief moment of disappointment, we moved forward. We are now working on an open source Teensy compatible board. The latest details on features, plans, and status are posted in the PJRC forums. Of course, PJRC being the designers of the Teensy, Sparkfun being the manufacturer. And we have some rather nice 3D renders here of the Teensy, which is the Adafruit's open source clone of the Teensy. We already have a prototype currently out for testing under the working name Teensy, and we will share more during our shows. However, there was almost immediately some more drama off the back of this. Looks like Sparkfun, Nate, is trying to drag Limor and I on Hacker News. Now, Limor refers to Limor Fried, who is the owner of Adafruit and someone who has apparently been directly involved in this. Now, I will say this is speculation. This is stuff I've read on the internet. Somebody has been harassing people online and tracking down people's personal details and stuff. Some people have pointed the picture at Limor Fried. I don't know enough about this to be able to pass any kind of judgment, and this isn't, this isn't a drama channel. I'm just trying to work out what's going on here, but that's who that refers to. And as mentioned, Limor is the owner of Adafruit, and incidentally, looking through the Wikipedia page here, married to Hackaday founder and former Make editor and Engadget podcast host Philip Tyrone. So, yeah, that's how that's all kind of connected. Anyway, this was on Hacker News, which is a news discussion site similar to Reddit, if you're familiar with that. And also, apparently the Paul, the maker of the Teensy Duino, which is the Arduino-compatible Teensy, has been in touch with them and said that there is concern about us using the term Teensy-compatible for their Teensy project. So they're in trouble for that as well. Then there was another response from Sparkfun, the manufacturer of the Teensy, who are now no longer supplying it to Adafruit. Are you keeping up? Good. Aside from directing to this official statement, Sparkfun has not made any public posts, comments, or submissions about this situation on external forums or platforms. Any suggestion otherwise is incorrect. So this statement is our only public communication on the matter. We're focused on moving forward and continuing to serve our customers and community. So that is basically referring to this little update here. Claiming that someone from Sparkfun called Nate was making comments on Hacker News. Apparently, that's not someone connected to Sparkfun and speaking in any kind of official capacity for the company. That's all I know about this drama. I hope that makes sense. It took me quite a while to put the pieces together, but essentially the long and short of it is that you will no longer be able to buy a Teensy, that's a microcontroller board, at Adafruit. They do sell alternatives to that if you are looking for a basis for your open source or indeed your DIY hardware project. They have started working on their own clone of that called the Teensy, which should be available at some point in the future. But if you do want an original Teensy, you can buy it from one of Sparkfun's other distributors. So not the end of the world, but some interesting drama nonetheless, and some accusations being thrown about. Probably shouldn't expect any less from a bunch of nerds and people in the open source community. But of course, hey, it's not exclusive to that world, is it? I mean, you get any group of people working together and there's going to be some tension and there's going to be some drama and there's going to be some people acting in bad faith, and that's just humanity, unfortunately. But hopefully that's helped to clear the situation up for anyone like me who was struggling to keep up with all of it. To be honest, that's the last I'm probably going to say on the matter, unless there's any kind of huge bombshells or anything. But yeah, best of luck for those of you out there, engaging in these open source hardware projects. Hopefully that isn't too much of a disruption to you or to your supply chain, and hopefully we can all, learn to get along a bit better in the future. Earlier in this week's Ramble, I talked about Amstrad in the context of a new user group that's been set up in the UK and their very first meetup, which is coming up later on this year in June. Of course, Amstrad were a huge part of the British computer industry back in the 1980s, alongside the likes of Sinclair and Acorn and those other brands that I mentioned when I was talking about that story. And if you owned any of those 8-bit computers, but particularly the Amstrads and the Sinclairs, I will say, you will no doubt be familiar with the work of Hewson Consultants, who were a British game developer, of course, one of the bigger names, I think it's fair to say. There were absolutely loads of these that started off as kind of one-man band bedroom coder things. There have been documentaries about these, and there's all sorts of news and information about those, and how they've kind of grown and turned into things over the years. But I want to focus on Hewson just for a moment. And there is a rather great interview here on mobygames.com with Andrew Hewson, the founder of Hewson Consultants, from a October 1985 issue of Sinclair User. So if you want to know a little bit about the very, very early days of Hewson Consultants, it is a really good read. So I will link to that down below so you can check that out. And it does mention some of their games and some of the platforms that they've been involved with here. So we've got Marauder, we've got Nebulous, we've got Netherworld, Stormlord, Astoreth, Deliverance, Stormlord 2, and later on they were acquired by 21st Century Entertainment Limited and went on to produce Pinball Dreams and Pinball Fantasies and Pinball Illusions. There's also a big list over on Wikipedia as well, mentioning some of their games, including Ranorama, which is one that I actually quite fondly remember from the Atari ST back in the day. But the point here being that Hewson Consultants did produce quite a lot of rather excellent stuff. And this Moby Games page is a great jumping off point as well if you want to learn a bit more about their games. Now, Hewson has continued in one form or another over the years and is releasing a new game. Although this is, not I don't think it's an official Hewson Consultants release as far as I can see. But Andrew Hewson and Rob Hewson are indeed personally involved in this, and it looks bloody fantastic. So thank you for discussing this over on my Discord this week. You know who you are. You will be credited at the end of this ramble. But this is a Kickstarter that is coming soon, so you can sign up to be notified of this. And it is a game called Hyper Sentinel Fusion. Let's have a look at the description. Perfectly boxed, pure retro gaming nostalgia. Remember when games came in gorgeous boxes when you were a kid growing up? When you cracked open a fresh, full-colour manual packed with tips, tricks and jaw-dropping artwork? When a floppy disk slid into your hand and that spring-loaded metal shutter snapped with perfection before you put it into your computer? Probably less so in the Spectrum and Amstrad days, I will say. This is talking about 3.5-inch floppies. But anyway, be the first to re-experience those sensations and emotions again and the thrill of real arcade action from the team and creators behind Hyper Sentinel. Slide open that floppy shutter to uncover a secret USB stash loaded with this new exciting retro game for the modern era. DRM-free for PC and Mac and crammed with bonus goodies, just like finding hidden cheat codes of the past. And we can see there is there's a bit of a GIF, I guess it's a GIF, of this floppy disk USB drive that they've designed for this release, which looks quite cool. You slide the shutter back on the floppy and the USB connector pops out, which I think is a rather nice touch. There is an unboxing of this and a demo of this on YouTube as well by Rainer the Mouse, which is linked from this Kickstarter, so please do go and check that out as well. And this game is being released on the Switch 2, the PlayStation, Steam, and the Xbox. And you can sign up for notifications, or you can try out the demo today. So certainly a lot of stuff on offer. So Award-winning shoot-'em-up action from the creators of the critically acclaimed Hyper Sentinel. It's Uridium and Paradroid combined with extraction shooter and roguelite elements in an explosive fusion of gameplay styles. This looks so bloody good, doesn't it? Swoop and shoot across the surface of colossal procedurally generated space destroyers and enemy bases. Harness the silky smooth controls to dogfight, dodge and destroy surface defenses. Land and infiltrate with your hyperdroid to plunder and pillage whatever you can steal before the whole place self-destructs. Make the choices on the fly to ensure you maximise your plunder and escape before the whole place goes boom. When you die, time rewinds, sending you back to Moonbase Alpha, your hub for reinvention. I'm getting like original Xenon vibes from this, I will say, but it does look like there's a lot more to it. Yeah, I guess stuff like Uridium and Paradroid and stuff. But yeah, we've got some hands-on impressions from Rain of the Mouse, from Retro Gamer Magazine, Platform 32, Retro Like, a few other big names in here. All very good, all sounding very positive. So if you're interested in that, the link will be down below in the description. If you are watching this on YouTube, on my second YouTube channel, youtube.com/ReeseRambles, or indeed listening on your podcast platform of choice, you'll find all the links for this week's stories, including this Kickstarter. And no details on pricing or release dates or anything as of yet, of course. This is in the kind of pre-notification stage. But I think looks absolutely awesome. I think I'm going to have to pick this up on Steam when it does eventually release. Although I will say I am mightily tempted by that floppy disk with the built-in USB drive, because I do think that's very clever. So a new project from Andrew and Rob Hewson. Of course, Hewson Consultants, a big name that you'll no doubt remember from back in the 80s on those 8-bit platforms. Just wanted to lend my support to this. Looks very good. And that, my dearest ramblers, brings me around rather neatly to my regular Videos of the Week feature, wherein I feature videos that I have seen here on the old YouTubes in the past week that have entertained, educated, enlightened, or otherwise improved my life in some small way. Sometimes there's one video, sometimes there's more than one video, sometimes they are retro and vintage computing, gaming and technology related, and sometimes they are very much not. And yeah, this week, a bit of a distraction, a bit of a diversion. I went through my YouTube history and I realised I haven't actually watched any retro computing or retro gaming videos in the past week. But I have been watching YouTube, particularly on Friday and Saturday nights. And I wanted to introduce you to something that my friends and I have been into. Certainly a couple of different friend groups now, as I've kind of introduced people to this. I don't think I was the first to discover this, although I'm not quite sure who was, so I don't really want to speculate on that front. But I thought that you might enjoy it too. And this is to do with music. I'm a huge, huge fan of music, and it seems whenever it comes to any kind of music quizzes or anything like that, that I have this bizarre in-depth knowledge of things like obscure artists and release dates and things like that. And so, I particularly enjoy doing music quizzes. Now, I don't mean the interactive kind of stuff where you go on your computer and you listen to, I think that did someone do one, there was one called Hurdle, I think, which was based on kind of when Wordle was popular, where it would play like a 2-second long clip of a song and then you had 5 seconds to guess what song it was and stuff like that. Perhaps less the interactive type things, but more the... the drunken gathering around the TV, everyone shouting at the TV, being the first to shout out the name of the song or the artist or whatever. And there are quite a lot of these on YouTube. And I've been watching these things for years. I've been taking part in these things for years with my friends, and they are an awful lot of fun. And it's probably what I'm going to be doing tonight and possibly Saturday night, as well. So a little insight into my life, and I thought I would... show you what this is all about. So the first one is Mad Martigan's music trivia, and this is Jeopardy style. So you have different categories and you have different squares which are worth different amounts of money. You're supposed to have, a pad and pen or whatever at home and kind of keep up with your score and stuff and keep score as you go along. We've never bothered doing that. You just sit there and shout out the answers as the music clips play. It's a load of fun. And I've always thought these were very well put together, and there's always a really great selection of songs and things. And also, they usually have some quite obscure things in there as well, which, even I, none of my friends have been able to identify. And it has introduced me to some new stuff. or new stuff by artists that I was already familiar with. Seems to lean more towards the older stuff, certainly a lot of classic rock and 80s pop hits and things like that, which is very, very much in my ballpark. So I can highly recommend this as a channel. I'm not going to pick any specific videos. They are very much of a muchness. They're all the same format. They're all a lot of fun to play along with at home. So I'm going to recommend those. I know, bizarre recommendation for a retro computing podcast, but please do stick with me. You should know the score by now. Now, the other one is the quiz channel. Now, this is a bit more upmarket, a bit more of a kind of higher quality production. And also, they don't just do music. They do like movie quizzes and things like that as well. But I very much enjoy their music quizzes, where they will play a few seconds of a song and then you have 5 seconds or whatever to work out what song it is. And these do a lot more of the kind of the modern stuff as well. Turns out I actually know a reasonable amount, and if I don't know who it is, I just shout Dua Lipa at the screen, and sometimes it's right. So that is that, the quiz channel. So apologies for not having a big list of retro computing and gaming recommendations for you this week. I think it's fair to say that a lot of us watch the same channels and end up with the same recommendations anyway, so perhaps something a bit different will be a bit more welcome for some of you. But that is Mad Martigan with his music quizzes, Jeopardy style. Grab a pad and a pen if you want and all keep score at home, or don't. It's just as fun either way. And the quiz channel. Unusual recommendations this week for videos of the week, but I hope you enjoy them. I know I certainly do. And that, as they say, is that. Thank you ever so much for joining me for this week's Ramble. Of course, these go out every Friday night at 2 minutes to midnight on my second YouTube channel, youtube.com/ReeseRambles, and also on all of the podcast platforms. So that's the Apple one, Spotify, used to be Google, but I think they shut that down, and YouTube Music and all the others. So I think it just goes out pretty much to everything. I don't really understand how it works, but I occasionally get people getting in touch saying that they listen to me on stuff that I haven't even heard of. So anyway, that's that. Of course, all of the stories that I have talked about in this week's Ramble will be linked down in the description below, or indeed in the show notes in your podcast app. So if you're interested in any of those, please do go and check them out. Of course, I will welcome your likes and comments down below. And if you're not subscribed to my second channel, please do subscribe as well as my main channel, Control-Alt-Reese, if you are familiar with that. I don't know if I have anyone who listens to these or watches these, but doesn't watch my main channel. That'd be interesting to find out. Do let me know down in the comments if that's the case for you. And finally, a lot of these stories, as always, come from my Discord server. This is stuff that's being discussed over on my Discord community. And I have a specific Reese Ramble submissions channel over there, which is very active and lots of great discussion about all of the week's stories. So this week's stories, I just wanted to give an extra special shout out to Sozzled, Naoki, Steve's Tech Shed, Technic, and Gravitone. Certainly a lot of the usual suspects there. So thank you ever so much to all of you for providing some of the stories that I have covered in this week's Ramble. But that's all I have for you for this week. I'm going to go and get this edited up and uploaded. I hope you all enjoy your weekend. Thank you ever so much for joining me once more. There's no main channel release, but as mentioned, I am working on that rather interesting Doom-related video, and also my review of the upcoming Pico IDE. So once I've got this edited and uploaded, I'm going to jump straight back onto those, and hopefully we'll have something for you to check out next week. But that's all I got. So thanks again, and bye.